Imam Ghazali wrote about what this world is like. It is indeed right to flee and distance oneself from it. Matters concerning the world should be of three kinds: either you are insightful and understanding. If you are one of these, then knowing the world is the enemy of Allah is sufficient for you. Allah loves you, and you are His friend, but the world corrupts your mind. Yet, intelligence is your measure of value. Or, you might be devoted to worship and diligent in your service to Allah. If you are one of these, then knowing the misfortune of the world, its desire, and contemplation prevent you from worship and doing good is sufficient for you. Or, you might be among those heedless of the truth, lacking the insight to show you the truth, and the community to lead you to good character. If you are one of these, knowing the world is not eternal is enough for you. The world is indeed not eternal. Either you will leave it, or it will leave you. As Hassan al-Basri said, even if the world were yours, you will not remain for the world. What benefit then is there in desiring it and spending your valuable life for it? A poet beautifully said, "Imagine the world was all yours, in the end, won't you perish? Do not wish for a life that has no end. The things you desire will soon be altered by nights. The world is nothing more than a shadow that momentarily shades you before disappearing." In such a situation, a sensible person would not be deceived by such things. The poet has beautifully spoken again, the world is like a jumbled dream or fleeting shadows. A sensible person would not be deceived by such things. Regarding Satan, what Allah Almighty has said about Satan and what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has said should be sufficient for you. Say, "My Lord, I seek refuge in you from the whispers of the devils. And I seek refuge in you, my Lord, lest they be present with me." Prophet Muhammad is the best of all creation, the most knowledgeable, the most intelligent, and the most virtuous that Allah Almighty has sent. Yet, even he sought refuge in Allah from the evil of Satan. If he needed this, what about your situation, given your ignorance, deficiency, and heedlessness? Regarding the people, most of those who perish are because of people. What should be sufficient for you about them is this: if you follow their desires and encounter them, you will become sinful and destroy your hereafter. If you oppose them, you will face their troubles and hardships, and they will make things difficult for you in worldly matters. Eventually, you will not escape being their enemy and thus become one of the damned. If they praise and elevate you, do not become arrogant or boastful. If they insult and pursue you, sometimes fear angering Allah for reasons other than His pleasure. In both cases, it is a destructive calamity. Then think about your state 3 days after you die and go to the grave. How they will abandon and forget you, as if you never saw them and they never saw you. There, nothing remains but the mercy of Allah. Now, is it not a great deficiency to waste your time with people whose loyalty is scarce and whose harm is great, and to abandon obedience to Allah, who is eternal and the ultimate refuge? Moreover, worldly and futile needs turn to Him immediately, and in every distress, reliance and trust are only in Allah. Think, O human, it is hope that you will find guidance. Allah, by His grace, is the true guide. Regarding the self, knowing its ugly states, lowly desires, and poor choices should be sufficient for you. The self is like an animal in lust, a lion in anger, a small child in misfortune, a pharaoh in abundance, a madman in hunger, and as you see in satiety. If you feed it, it becomes spoiled and happy; if you starve it, it screams and shouts. As the poet said, it is like a donkey that brays when hungry and kicks when fed. Some righteous have said, one of the evils and ignorances of the self is that when it wants to sin or is overcome by lust, even if you try to stop it or remind it of Allah, His messenger, all prophets, His book, and all His good servants, or present to it death, the grave, the day of judgment, paradise, and hell, it will not obey or abandon its desire. But if you slightly reduce its food and resist, it calms down and leaves its lust, as beautifully stated. Therefore, O human, do not be heedless of yourself, because it is as its knowing Creator said, indeed, the self persistently commands evil. Certainly, words of some righteous like Ahmad bin Han Bal have reached us. I was about to strike myself for urging me. I said, Subhanallah. Allah Almighty says in the Quran, indeed, the self persistently commands evil. If that's the case, it's commanding me for good now. That can't be. Maybe it's relieved by the people's reception of me or their honor, kindness, and respect upon hearing of my going to war. Then I said to myself, if I go, I will stay in a deserted place, unseen by anyone. It agreed, but I didn't trust its sincerity. The truest word is Allah's. You are a liar, I said. Then I told it, I will fight the enemy without any armor, and you will die first. It agreed, but again, I didn't trust its sincerity. Whatever I said, it agreed. Finally, I said, O Allah, reveal what it wants to do, for I accuse it and affirm you. Eventually, its intention became clear. It seemed to say, every day you oppose my desires and kill me several times without anyone noticing. If you go to war, you will die once, and I will be free from you. People will hear, Ahmad is martyred, and I will gain honor and fame. Ahmad says, so I held back from war. Look at the deceit and trickery of the self, wanting to achieve posthumous fame through an act never done before. The poet has spoken beautifully. The poet has spoken so beautifully, preserve yourself and never be complacent about its evils. For the self is more treacherous than 70 devils. May Allah be your helper. Always be alert against this deceitful self, which incessantly commands to evil, and firmly resolve to oppose it in your heart. Then you will find the right path and escape from sin. You must then strike it with the ship of piety, for it cannot be preserved by anything else. Know that there is a principle here. Worship is of two kinds, the duties to be performed and the evils to be avoided. The duties are acts of worship, while avoiding sins and evils is piety. This avoidance, in all situations, is more virtuous and honorable for a servant than performing duties. Those who engage in acts of worship are often occupied with the things they should avoid. Their entire effort is to prevent their hearts from inclining towards anything other than Allah and to protect their stomachs from overeating, their tongues from vain talk, and their eyes from looking at things that are of no benefit in this world or the hereafter. In this sense, some people are so enamored with prayer that they prefer it over everything else. Prayer is the pillar of worship in terms of devotion, sincerity, supplication, and austerity. Some are so fond of fasting that they wouldn't prefer anything over it. For others, charity is so dear that they choose it above all. O Yunus, I reveal all these aspirations to you. So, make your long prayers an exercise in patience and submission to Allah's commands, fasting a means to ward off hardships, and charity a way to refrain from harming others. Indeed, there is no greater charity than avoiding harm to others, and no better fasting than staying away from evils. Know that avoiding sins is better than engaging in worshipful acts. When both avoiding sins and performing acts of worship come together, your task is complete, and your desire is fulfilled. You will be in safety and gain. If you can only do one, let it be avoiding the things you should stay away from. Thus, even if you don't gain, you at least seek safety. Otherwise, you risk loss in both aspects. Night prayers and the hardships endured, followed by a wrongful act, and fasts in long days, followed by an incorrect word, will not benefit you. Ibn Abbas narrates being asked about two people, one who does much good but also much harm, and another who does little of both. He said, "Would not exchange my safety for anything." Our previous division of worship is like the case of a patient. This analogy is because the cure for illness is also twofold: medication and diet. If both are applied, you will see the disease cured and the patient healed. If only one can be applied, diet is better. For without diet, medication is of no use, yet diet alone can be very beneficial. As our Prophet said, the chief of all remedies is diet. This means, as Allah knows best, that diet makes all medications unnecessary. Hence, it is said that most Indian treatments involve just dieting, refraining from food, drink, and speech for a few days. All this shows that piety is the foundation and truth of religious commands, and those who possess it are higher in rank than mere worshippers. Therefore, you should devote all your efforts to this and turn towards it. Only Allah, with His mercy, can grant success. Then pay close attention to these four essential parts of the human body. First, the eye. Know that the heart is the center of both religious and worldly affairs, and often its destruction, occupation, and corruption come from the eye. Hence, Ali said, "Whoever does not control his eyes has no value for his heart." Second, the tongue. Know that your earnings, benefits, the hardships you endure, and all your efforts in worship and obedience are centered on the tongue. Often, acts of worship are destroyed, collapsed, and corrupted by hypocrisy, lying, adornment, backbiting, etc. A single word of hardship can invalidate your worship of 1 year, even 5 to 10 years. Hence, it is said, there is nothing more deserving of prolonged imprisonment than the tongue. It is narrated that Yunus was told, "O Yunus, if those who try to worship knew that keeping silent and enduring is a greater strength than lengthy worship, they wouldn't seek anything more." He continued, "There is nothing more virtuous and ensuring the safety of the heart than preserving your religion." What great words these are! Then think about the breaths you waste in speaking harmful words. If you had said, "I seek forgiveness from Allah," instead, you would have hit a precious moment, and Allah might have forgiven you, gaining great benefit. Or if you had said, "There is no God but Allah," you would have earned immeasurable rewards. Or if you had said, "O Allah, I ask for health," maybe this prayer would have been welcomed by Allah and granted, saving you from the calamities of this world and the hereafter. Isn't it a great loss and a base deception to kill yourself and time with useless things, at least until the day of judgment, questioning, and imprisonment? The poet has spoken beautifully again. When you want to speak of useless things, glorify Allah instead. Third, the stomach. Know that your goal is worship, and food is like the seed and water of your deed. From eating comes the act, and it grows. If the seed is bad, the crop will not be good. Sometimes bad seed ruins the field, and you never recover. When fasting, pay attention to what and with whom you break your fast, and whose food you eat. There are many who are turned from their state by a single morsel, never to return to their former state. Many morsels deprive one of night worship, and many glances prevent one from reading the Quran for a while. Sometimes a single bite of food deprives one of a year's worth of worship. So, if you have goodness in your heart and are eager to worship your Lord, be very careful about what you eat. This emphasis on lawful food is for this reason. Then, while eating, it is also necessary to observe etiquette. If you do not take care, you become a slave to your stomach. If you do not take care, you will become a slave to your stomach, wasting time with meals. We have known for certain and seen with our own eyes that worship performed with a full stomach does not bring any good. If you force yourself to worship and employ various tricks for it, the pleasure and taste of that worship will not be there. Therefore, it has been said not to expect the sweetness of worship alongside excessive eating. Is there any light in a person without worship or in worship without delight? In this context, Ibrahim bin Etham once said, I spoke with many devout people in the mountains of Lebanon. They advised me that when I return among people, I should counsel them with these 4 principles. A person who eats a lot cannot taste the joy of worship. One who sleeps a lot cannot find blessing in life. One who seeks the approval of people cannot wait for the approval of Allah. And one who speaks too much and gossips cannot leave this world as a Muslim. All virtues are encapsulated in these 4 practices: eating little, not speaking of useless things, not mingling with people unnecessarily, and enlivening the nights with worship. Some wise men say, hunger is our capital. This means that everything good for us, like salvation from sin, safety, sweetness in worship, knowledge, and beneficial deeds, comes from hunger and patience for the sake of Allah. The 4th principle concerns the heart. Know that it is the source of all limbs. If you corrupt it, all limbs are corrupted. If you rectify it, all limbs are rectified. The heart is like the trunk of a tree, and the other limbs are its branches. Trees drink water with their trunks. If the root is good, they thrive, but if it's bad, they spoil. The heart is the king of the body, and the other limbs are its subjects and soldiers. If the king is good, the subjects are good. If it's corrupted, they are too. Thus, the correctness of other organs like the eyes or stomach indicates the heart's correctness and construction. If you see them indulging in the unlawful or corrupted, know that it's because of the heart's corruption, which is often more severe than the others. Therefore, strive with all your effort to reform the heart so that the rest of the limbs may also be rectified. Reforming the heart is a subtle and difficult task, as it is influenced by thoughts that are beyond your control. However, trying to resist and exert effort is possible, though challenging. This is why those who strive to reform the heart find it very difficult, and why it is highly esteemed among those with insight. Bestami is reported to have said, I tried to treat my heart, tongue, and self for 10 years, and the most difficult was my heart. What a profound statement. Then, as I mentioned above, you must pay attention to 4 vices: excessive action, haste, asceticism, and pride. We single out these 4 from other bad traits and encourage their avoidance, especially among scholars, because these 4 are worse and more harmful than others. You see a reciter of the Quran who performs lengthy acts of worship, thinking it's good, but it leads to laziness in deeds. You may see someone rushing to attain spiritual levels only to fall lower, or someone hastily accepting a pious person's opinion only to be deprived of it, or someone quickly cursing for a wrongdoing and then regretting it. This situation is metaphorically described in the story of Prophet Noah. You may see someone envious of their peers for what Allah has given them, sometimes even leading them to disgraceful and ugly situations that even the wicked and sinners wouldn't do. In this regard, Sufyan said, I fear the blood of scholars and memorizers more than anything else. Those around him thought this statement excessive, but he replied, I am not saying this, Ibrahim an-Nakhai is. It is narrated that a servant said to him, Be wary of memorizers and those with them, including me. If one of them contradicts his most beloved by saying, No, this is sour, not sweet, I would not feel safe from his spiteful retaliation. Malik bin Dinar is reported to have said, I accept the testimonies of memorizers about all people, but not about each other. For I have seen them being overly jealous of one another. Stay away from memorizers. Buy a house far from those who memorize religious texts, for they will expose any flaw immediately and envy you for any blessing you receive. You will see them arrogant and disdainful towards people, as if their additional 2 units of prayer were a favor to humanity, or as if they were guaranteed paradise or salvation from hell, or as if they were ordained eternal happiness while others were doomed. Furthermore, these people wear modest clothing made of wool and other materials, pretending to be humble, yet such garments are not suitable for exaltation or arrogance. They are the opposite, but the blind cannot see. The so-called pious person who dresses out of ignorance or in a casual, disrespectful manner, thinking it makes them look humble and pious, does not understand that humility is not about appearance. They think their piety makes them trustworthy, but their piety is nothing more than a facade. A person pretending to be pious chooses not their path but another's. Therefore, O human, especially avoid pride among the 4 calamities I mentioned, because excessive deeds, haste, and envy are slippery grounds. If you slip in any of them, you fall into sin. But pride is such a slippery ground that if you fall there, you plunge into the sea of disbelief and transgression. Remember Satan's words and his insurrection. He refused and aspired to pride, and he was among the disbelievers. We seek refuge in Allah from all kinds of rebellion, for he is generous and kind. Consider this transient world. If you think about it, you'll realize the world is not eternal, its benefits do not outweigh its harms, and it leads to unbearable torment in the afterlife and numerous difficulties in this life. If you truly understand this, you will avoid the trivialities of the world and will not seek more than what you need for worship. By forsaking the pleasures and delights of the world, you draw closer to the Lord of all worlds, the giver of all blessings, the omnipotent and sovereign, and you aspire to the eternal abode of paradise. Knowing the futility and troubles of mingling with people, you will avoid them unless necessary. When you must interact, you benefit from their goodness and avoid their harm. When speaking, you converse with those who do not bring harm and do not regret serving them. If you maintain a relationship with His book, Allah will be your helper, and you will see all good in Him in this world and the hereafter. You will find Him with you in all adversities. As our Prophet said, be mindful of Allah's rights. Wherever you turn, you will find Allah there. Regarding Satan, know that he is like a hostile older brother. You repel this accursed dog's enmities by remembering Allah, the omnipotent and sovereign. Do not pay much attention to this accursed one, for repelling him is easy as long as you possess the resolve of the complete human being. As Allah has said, the truth is that He has no authority over those who believe and rely on their Lord. What are the world and Satan? The world is but a past dream and a future desire. Satan, I swear by Allah, cannot benefit from obedience or harm from rebellion. How true this is, for there is no need for such trivialities. Indeed, Allah has generously provided for His servants in their livelihoods and has not made them dependent on harmful things in religious matters. So, what need is there to engage in such trivialities? As some wise men have said, piety is the easiest thing. If something makes me doubtful, I leave it because the self calms down as long as I refrain from it, and I comply with whatever I am obligated to do. As the poet said, as you encourage the self, it desires more. If you limit it to a little, it will be content. Another poet said, the self carries whatever burden you place on it. Another poet is reported to have said, eventually, the self will comply with whatever you have previously obligated it to do. Yet another poet said, I endured pleasures until myself protested, then I forced myself to endure enjoyment, and it continued. It's like a young man who grows stronger when challenged, otherwise he complies. If you understand what I've said, you will be among those ascetics who seek the hereafter in this world. Know that whoever is named an ascetic is as if named with 1,000 beautiful names. They are those who hold only the love of Allah in their hearts and serve only Him. As the poet said, some people are preoccupied with the world, while others stay alone for their Lord. Their Lord directs them to the door of their desires and makes no one need them. They bind their feet at night for worship, and Allah, who sees everything, watches over them. When their Lord greets them, how fortunate they are. And you, hear Allah saying, you have no authority over my servants. You will be among the pious who attain happiness in this world and the hereafter, rising to a higher rank than many angels. For they do not have the desires and filthy self that lead to evil. You have passed through this difficult and long journey, overcoming all obstacles to reach your goal. Do not be afraid of crossing these passages, for with Allah's help, it is easy. May Allah assist us with His grace and ease in our difficulties, for He is sufficient for all important matters. All help in difficult tasks comes from Him. Everything that has happened and will happen is within His power. He is capable of everything. This is what I had to tell you, and strength and power belong only to Allah.